Chapter 16 of Penrod. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Jonathan Burchard, April 2009. Chapter 16, A New Star. Sam, Penrod, Herman, and Verman withdrew in considerable state from non-paying view, and repairing to the hayloft, declared the exhibition open to the public. Oral proclamation was made by Sam, and then the loitering multitude was enticed by seductive strains of a band, the two partners performing upon combs and paper, Herman and Verman upon tin pans with sticks. The effect was immediate. Visitors appeared upon the stairway and sought admission. Herman and Verman took position among the exhibits, near the wall. Sam stood at the entrance, officiating as barker and ticket-seller, while Penrod, with debonair suavity, acted as curator, master of ceremonies, and lecturer. He greeted the first to enter with a courtly bow. They consisted of Miss Rennsdale and her nursery governess, and they paid spot cash for their admission. "Walk in, ladies! Walk right in! Pray do not obstruct the passageway," said Penrod, in a remarkable voice. "Pray be seated. There is room for each and all." Miss Rennsdale and governess were followed by Mr. Georgie Bassett and baby sister, which proves the perfection of Georgie's character, and 6 or 7 other neighborhood children, a most satisfactory audience, although, subsequent to Miss Rennsdale and governess, admission was wholly by pin. "Gentlemen and ladies," shouted Penrod, "I will first call your attention to our genuine South American dog, part alligator." He pointed to the dachshund and added, in his ordinary tone, "That's him." Straightway reassuming the character of showman, he bellowed, "Next you see Duke, the genuine full-blooded Indian dog from the far western plains and Rocky Mountains. Next, the trained Michigan rats, captured way up there, and trained to jump and run all over the box at the slightest pretext." He paused, partly to take breath, and partly to enjoy his own surprised discovery that this phrase was in his vocabulary. "At the slightest pretext," he repeated, and continued, suiting the action to the word, "I will now hammer upon the box, and each and all may see the genuine full-blooded Michigan rats perform at the slightest pretext. There! That's all they do now, but I and Sam are going to train 'em lots more before this afternoon. Gentlemen and ladies, I will kindly now call your attention to Sherman, the wild animal from Africa, costing the lives of the wild trapper and many of his companions. Next, let me kindly introduce to you Herman and Verman. Their father got mad and stuck his pitchfork right inside of another man, exactly as promised upon the advertisements outside the big tent, and no extra charge. And remember, you are each and all now looking at 2 wild tattooed men which the father of is in jail. Point, Herman! Each and all will have a chance to see. Point to something else, Herman. This is the only genuine one-fingered tattooed wild man. Last on the program, gentlemen and ladies, we have Verman, the savage tattooed wild boy that can't speak only his native foreign languages. Talk some, Verman." Verman obliged and made an instantaneous hit. He was encored rapturously, again and again, and thrilling with the unique pleasure of being introduced and misunderstood at the same time, would have talked all day but too gladly. Sam Williams, however, with a true showman's foresight, whispered to Penrod, who rang down on the monologue, "Gentlemen and ladies, this closes our performance. Pray pass out quietly and with as little jostling as possible. As soon as you are all out, there's going to be a new performance, and each and all are welcome at the same and simple price of admission. Pray pass out quietly and with as little jostling as possible. Remember, the price is only 1 cent, the 10th part of a dime, or 20 pins. No bent ones taken. Pray pass out quietly and with as little jostling as possible. The Schofield and Williams Military Band will play before each performance, and each and all are welcome for the same and simple price of admission. Pray pass out quietly and with as little jostling as possible." Forthwith, the Schofield and Williams Military Band began a second overture, in which something vaguely like a tune was at times distinguishable, and all of the first audience returned, most of them having occupied the interval in hasty excursions for more pins. Miss Rennsdale and governess, however, again paying coin of the Republic and receiving deference and the best seats accordingly. and when a third performance found all the same inveterate patrons once again more crowding the auditorium, and 7 recruits added, the pleasurable excitement of the partners in their venture will be understood by anyone who has seen a metropolitan manager strolling about the foyer of his theatre some evening during the earlier stages of an assured phenomenal run. From the first, there was no question which feature of the entertainment was the attraction extraordinary. Vermin. Vermin, the savage, tattooed wild boy, speaking only in his native foreign languages. Vermin was a triumph. Beaming, wreathed in smiles, melodious, incredibly fluent, he had but to open his lips and a dead hush fell upon the audience. Breathless, they leaned forward, hanging upon his every semi-syllable, and when Penrod checked the flow, burst into thunders of applause, which Vermin received with happy laughter. Alas! He delayed not o'er long to display all the egregiousness of a new star. But for a time there was no caprice of his too eccentric to be forgiven. During Penrod's lecture upon the other curios, the tattooed wild boy continually stamped his foot, grinned, and gesticulated, tapping his tiny chest, and pointing to himself as it were to say, "Wait for me! I am the big show!" So soon they learn, so soon they learn. And, again alas, this spoiled darling of public favour, like many another, was fated to know in good time the fickleness of that favour. But during all the morning performances he was the idol of his audience, and looked it. The climax of his popularity came during the 5th overture of the Schofield and Williams Military Band, when the music was quite drowned in the agitated clamours of Miss Rennsdale, who was endeavouring to ascend the stairs in spite of the physical dissuasion of her governess. "I won't come to lunch!" screamed Miss Rennsdale, her voice accompanied by the sound of ripping. "I will hear the tattooed wild boy talk some more! It's lovely! I will hear him talk! I will! I want to listen to Vermin! I want to! Wailing, she was borne away. Of her sex, not the first to be fascinated by obscurity, nor the last to champion its eloquence. Vermin was almost unendurable after this, but, like many other managers, Schofield and Williams restrained their choler, and even laughed fulsomely when their principal attraction essayed the role of a comedian in private, and capered and squawked in sheer fatuous vanity. The first performance of the afternoon rivalled the successes of the morning, and, although Miss Rennsdale was detained at home, thus drying up the single source of cash income developed before lunch, Maurice Levy appeared, escorting Marjorie Jones, and paid coin for 2 admissions, dropping the money into Sam's hand with a careless, nay, a contemptuous gesture. At sight of Marjorie, Penrod Schofield flushed under his new moustache, repainted since noon, and lectured as he had never lectured before. A new grace invested his every gesture. A new sonorousness rang in his voice. A simple and manly pomposity marked his very walk as he passed from curio to curio. And when he fearlessly handled the box of rats and hammered upon it with cool insouciance, he beheld, for the first time in his life, a pearl of admiration eddying in Marjorie's lovely eye. A certain softening of that eye. And then Vermin spake, and Penrod was forgotten. Marjorie's eye rested upon him no more. A heavily equipped chauffeur ascended the stairway, bearing the message that Mrs. Levy awaited her son and his lady. Thereupon, having devoured the last sound permitted, by the managers, to issue from Vermin, Mr. Levy and Miss Jones departed to a real matinee at a real theatre, the limpid eyes of Marjorie looking back softly over her shoulder, but only at the tattooed wild boy. Nearly always it is woman who puts the irony into life. After this, perhaps because of sated curiosity, perhaps on account of a pin famine, the attendance began to languish. Only 4 responded to the next call of the band, the 4 dwindled to 3, and finally the entertainment was given for 1 blasé auditor, and Schofield and Williams looked depressed. Then followed an interval when the band played in vain. About 3 o'clock, Schofield and Williams were gloomily discussing various unpromising devices for startling the public into a renewal of interest, when another patron unexpectedly appears and paid a cent for his admission. News of the big show and museum of curiosities had at last penetrated the far, cold spaces of interstellar niceness, for this new patron consisted of no less than Roderick Magsworth Bitts, Jr., escaped in white sailor suit from the Manor during a period of severe maternal and tutorial preoccupation. He seated himself without parley, and the performance was offered for his entertainment with admirable conscientiousness. True to the Lady Clara caste and training, Roderick's pale, fat face expressed nothing, except an impervious superiority, and as he sat, cold and unimpressed upon the front bench, like a large white lump, it must be said that he made a discouraging audience to play to. He was not, however, unresponsive. Far from it. He offered comment very chilling to the warm grandiloquence of the orator. "That's my Uncle Ethelbert's dachshund," he remarked, at the beginning of the lecture. "You better take him back if you don't want to get arrested." And when Penrod, rather uneasily ignoring the interruption, proceeded to the exploitation of the genuine full-blooded Indian dog, Duke. "Why don't you try to give that dog away?" asked Roderick. "You couldn't sell him." "My papa would buy me lots better coon than that," was the information volunteered a little later. "Only I wouldn't want the nasty old thing." Herman, of the missing finger, obtained no greater indulgence. "Pooh!" said Roderick. "We have 2 fox terriers in our stables that took prizes at the kennel show, and their tails were bit off. There's a man that always bites fox terriers' tails off." "Oh, my gosh, what a lie!" exclaimed Sam Williams ignorantly. "Go on with the show whether he likes it or not, Penrod. He's paid his money." Verman, confident of his singular powers, chuckled openly at the failure of the other attractions to charm the frosty visitor, and when his turn came, poured forth a torrent of conversation which was straightway damned. "Rotten," said Mr. Bitts languidly. "Anybody could talk like that. I could do it if I wanted to." Verman paused suddenly. "Yes, you could!" exclaimed Penrod, stung. "Let's hear you do it, then." "Yes, sir," the other partner shouted. "Let's just hear you do it." "I said I could if I wanted to," responded Roderick. "I didn't say I would." "Yay! He knows he can't," sneered Sam. "I can, too, if I try." "Well, let's hear you try." So challenged, the visitor did try, but in the absence of an impartial jury, his effort was considered so pronounced a failure that he was howled down, derided, and mocked with great clamors. "Anyway," said Roderick, when things had quieted down, "if I couldn't get up a better show than this, I'd sell out and leave town." Not having enough presence of mind to inquire what he would sell out, his adversaries replied with mere formless yells of scorn. "I could get up a better show than this with my left hand," Roderick asserted. "Well, what would you have in your old show?" asked Penrod, condescending to language. "That's all right. What I'd have enough. You couldn't get Herman and Vermin in your old show." "No, and I wouldn't want 'em either." "Well, what would you have?" insisted Penrod derisively. "You'd have to have something. You couldn't be a show yourself." "How do you know?" This was but meandering while waiting for ideas, and evoked another yell. "You think you could be a show all by yourself?" demanded Penrod. "How do you know I couldn't?" 2 white boys and 2 black boys shrieked the scorn of the boaster. "I could, too!" Roderick raised his voice to a sudden howl, obtaining a hearing. "Well, why don't you tell us how?" "Well, I know how, all right," said Roderick. "If anybody asks you, you can just tell them I know how, all right?" "Why, you can't do anything," Sam began argumentatively. "You talk about being a show all by yourself. What could you try to do? Show us something you can do." "I didn't say I was going to do anything," returned the badgered one, still evading. "Well, then how'd you be a show?" Penrod demanded. "We got a show here, even if Herman didn't point or Vermin didn't talk. Their father stabbed a man with a pitchfork, I guess, didn't he?" "How do I know?" "Well, I guess he's in jail, ain't he?" "Well, what if their father's in jail? I didn't say he wasn't, did I?" "Well, your father ain't in jail, is he?" "Well, I never said he was, did I?" "Well, then," continued Penrod, "how could you be a—" He stopped abruptly, staring at Roderick, the birth of an idea plainly visible in his altered expression. He had suddenly remembered his intention to ask Roderick Magsworth Bitts, Jr., about Rena Magsworth, and this recollection collided in his mind with the irritation produced by Roderick's claiming some mysterious attainment which would warrant his setting up as a show in his single person. Penrod's whole manner changed instantly. "Roddy," he asked, almost overwhelmed by a prescience of something vast and magnificent, "Roddy, are you any relation of Rena Magsworth?" Roderick had never heard of Rena Magsworth, although a concentration of the sentence yesterday pronounced upon her had burned, black and horrific, upon the face of every newspaper in the country. He was not allowed to read the journals of the day, and his family's indignation over the sacrilegious coincidence of the name had not been expressed in his presence. But he saw it was an awesome name to Penrod Schofield and Samuel Williams. Even Herman and Vermin, though lacking many educational advantages on account of a long residence in the country, were informed on the subject of Rena Magsworth through hearsay, and they joined in the portentous silence. "Roddy," repeated Penrod, "honest, is Rena Magsworth some relation of yours?" There is no obsession more dangerous to its victim than a conviction, especially an inherited one, of superiority. This world is so full of Missourians, and from his earliest years Roderick Magsworth Bitts, Jr., had been trained to believe in the importance of the Magsworth family. At every meal he absorbed a sense of Magsworth greatness, and yet, in his infrequent meetings of persons of his own age and sex, he was treated as negligible. Now, dimly, he perceived that there was a Magsworth claim of some sort which was impressive even to boys. Magsworth blood was the essential of all true distinction in the world, he knew. Consequently, having been driven into a cul-de-sac as a result of flagrant and unfounded boasting, he was ready to take advantage of what appeared to be a triumphal way out. "Roddy," said Penrod again with solemnity, "is Rena Magsworth some relation of yours?" "Is she, Roddy?" asked Sam, almost hoarsely. "She's my aunt!" shouted Roddy. Silence followed. Sam and Penrod, spellbound, gazed upon Roderick Magsworth Bitts, Jr. So did Herman and Vermin. Roddy's staggering lie had changed the face of things utterly. No one questioned it. No one realized that it was much too good to be true. "Roddy," said Penrod, in a voice tremulous with hope, "Roddy, will you join our show?" Roddy joined. Even he could see that the offer implied his being starred as the paramount attraction of a new order of things. It was obvious that he had swelled out suddenly in the estimation of the other boys, to that importance which he had been taught to believe his native gift and natural right. The sensation was pleasant. He had often been treated with effusion by grown-up callers and by acquaintances of his mothers and sisters. He had heard ladies speak of him as charming and that delightful child, and little girls had sometimes shown him deference, but until this moment no boy had ever allowed him, for one moment, to presume even to equality. Now, in a trice, he was not only admitted to comradeship, but patently valued as something rare and sacred to be acclaimed and pedestalled. In fact, the very first thing that Schofield and Williams did was to find a box for him to stand upon. The misgivings roused in Roderick's bosom by the subsequent activities of the firm were not bothersome enough to make him forgo his prominence as Exhibit A. He was not a quick-minded boy, and it was long, and much happened, before he thoroughly comprehended the causes of his new celebrity. He had a shadowy feeling that if the affair came to be heard of at home it might not be liked, but, intoxicated by the glamour and bustle which surrounded a public character, he made no protest. On the contrary, he entered wholeheartedly into the preparations for the new show. Assuming, with Sam's assistance, a blue moustache and sideburns, he helped in the painting of a new poster which, supplanting the old one on the wall of the stable facing the cross street, screamed bloody murder at the passers in that rather populous thoroughfare. "Schofield and Williams' new big show. Roderick Magsworth Bitts, Jr., only living nephew of Rena Magsworth, the famous murderess, going to be hung next July. Killed 8 people. Put arsenic in their milk. Also Sherman, Herman, and Vermin, the Michigan rat's dog part alligator. Duke the genuine Indian dog, admission 1 cent or 20 pins, same as before. Do not miss this chance to see Roderick, only living nephew of Rena Magsworth, the great famous murderess, going to be hung." End of chapter 16.